As I turn the pages of the farmer's histories, my own history flashes back to me. It comes in glimpses like the lightning outside the cave, bright, fast. I can't tell if I'm seeing more or being blinded. The rain pours down, and I picture the river outside pushing everything before it, running over the names carved on Sarah's little stone, and leaving her bones bare. Panic rises in me. I can't be trapped here. I can't come so close to breaking free to fail. I find a notebook filled with lined paper covered in childish scrawls. SSS. A hard letter to learn for the first one. Was it Hunter's daughter who wrote this? I think you're old enough now, my father says, handing me a piece of cottonwood he brought out of the canyon with him. He had one too. He made a mark in this mud left over from the rain the night before. It's something I learned in the canyon. Look, K. That's how your name starts. They should say you should always teach the person's name first. That way, even if they never learn to write anything else, they always have something. Later, he told me he was going to teach the other children too. Why? I asked. I was 5. I didn't want him to teach the others. He knew what I was thinking. It's not knowing how to write that makes you interesting, he says. It's what you write. But if everyone can write, I won't be special, I say. That's the only thing that matters, he says. You want to be special, I say, even though I knew you'd want to be the pilot. I want to be the pilot so bad, so I can help people, he told me. But then I nodded. I believed him. I think he might have believed himself too. Another memory flashes to mind. A time when I took a note around the village for my father, running it from place to place so that others could have a turn reading it. The paper said the time and place of the next meeting, and my father burned it as soon as I came home. What is this meeting about? I asked my father. Farmers have refused again to join the rising, he says. What will you do? My mother asked. He loved the farmers. They are not the rising. We're the ones who taught him to write. But the rising had approached him first back before we were reclassified. They were planning to fight, and he loved to fight. I'll stay loyal to the rising, he says, but I'll still trade with the farmers. Indy leans forward and catches my eyes. She gives me a slight smile, and her hand rests on her pack, as though she just slipped something inside. What did she find? I look at her until she turns away. Whatever it is, she's not showing Cassia either. I'll have to find out later. A few months before the last firing, my father taught me to wire. That was his job, to repair the wiring on everything that fell apart in the village. Things broke often. We were used to it. All equipment was the leftovers from society just like us. Food warming mechanisms, in particular, were always breaking. We even heard rumors that the meals in the society shipped us were mass-produced and contained standardized vitamins, nothing like the individual calibrated meals given to the people back in the other provinces. If you can do my job here, he says, like fixing the food machines and the heaters in the house, I can keep traveling into the canyon. No one will tell society that it's you working instead of me. I nod. Not everyone is good with their hands, my father says, sitting back. You are. You come by it from both of us. I glance over to where my mother painted and then looks back into the wires I held. I always knew what I wanted to do, my father said. I knew how low the score to get assigned as a mechanical repair. It was risky, I say. It was, he says. But I always come out where I should. He smiles at me and around him at the outer province, which he loved and where he belonged. Then he became serious. Now let's see if you can do what I did. I arranged the wires in plastic tabs. The timer, the way he showed me, one small alteration. Good, Father says, sounding pleased. You have intuition too. Society says it doesn't really exist, but it does. The next book I pick up is heavy, engraved with the words ledger. I turn the pages carefully, beginning at the end and working my way backwards. Though I half expected it, still hurts when I see his trades in there. I know them by his signature on the lines and by the dates mentioned. He was the one of the last to keep trading with the farmers even when life, not of Providence, became more and more dangerous. He thought that quitting would seem like a sign of weakness. Like it says in the pamphlets, there's always a pilot and others being groomed to take his or her place if the pilot falls. My father was never the pilot, but he was one of the people standing in line. Do what society tells you, I say to him, when I got older and could see how many risks he took. Then we won't get in trouble. But he couldn't help himself. He was smart, cunning, and he was all action, no subtlety. He never knew when to stop. I could see that even when I was a child. It was enough to go into the canyon to trade, but he had to bring writing out. It wasn't enough to teach me, he had to teach all the children, and then their parents. It wasn't enough to know of the rising, he had to move it forward. It was his fault we died. He pushed too hard, took too many risks. The people wouldn't have been gathered together for a meeting if it weren't for him. After the final firing, who came to get the survivors? The society, not the rising. I've seen how they leave you when they don't need you anymore. I'm afraid of the rising. Even more than that, I'm afraid of who I'll be in the rising. I walk over to where Indy stood, and then she slipped something into her pack. On the table in front of me sits waterproof boxes full of maps. Glance over at Indy, she moved on. Her fingers turned to the pages of the book. She bent her head, reminds me of the bell in the Unica flower tip down towards the ground. We're running low on time, I say, picking up a box. I'm going to find a map for each of us to use in case we get separated. Cassia nods. She found something else interesting. I can't see what it is, but I can see the joy in her face and the way her body tenses in excitement. The very idea of the rising makes her come alive. It's what she wants. Maybe it's even what her grandfather wanted her to find. I know you came into the carving for me, Cassia, but the rising is the one place I don't know if I can go for you.